Over the last year on this app, it's become really clear that the one drop rule does not work as a way to talk about race anymore. This is going to be a little bit of a more serious post, and I'm hoping that we can have this conversation without people brawling in the comments. I've been wanting to make this post for a while, but I'm deciding to make it now because a lot of people are talking about Cardi B, and literally this morning I saw people arguing about whether Cardi B is black or not. I'm holding my mic because I like to move my hands, but I don't want to hear any comments and I don't want to hear any bean soup in this one. But if you've been on this app for a couple of years and this is a conversation that you've seen, especially if you follow any black creators, like whenever we talk about famous black celebrities, it immediately comes up. Last year, it was a huge topic of conversation when this creator, Shane, made this post, The Rise of the Biracial Black Girl and the Future of Black Female Representation. I think he got like 1 million views and then a bunch of people made responses to that. Basically, whenever we have a conversation about black representation in media, there inevitably comes up this question of, are biracial people black? Are mixed people black? Are multiracial people black? And it turns into a brawl, people just fighting in the comments. Like I said, this is going to be a serious post, and I figured I could have a conversation with my family members from across the diaspora. I also have a master's in sociology, so I figured I could throw in some education here. If you don't know, the one drop rule is a historical sort of measure of determining your race that said if you had any black ancestors or any black ancestry at all, like even one great-great-great-grandparent, then you were black, right? That was the census determination. You did not count as a fully white person, which meant that you were not allowed to own property or vote, and it had major societal ramifications for you and your ability to work. And combined with Jim Crow, segregation, and redlining, this meant that anybody who had any ancestry of anyone who was a victim of the Atlantic slave trade was not allowed to work or exist or intermarry or live or vote or buy property in very specific places. Most places, right? Actually, it meant the opposite, that you were only allowed to live in certain places and only allowed to work certain jobs. I'm going to put my thesis here at the top for the people who aren't going to watch this all the way through, but basically, for a long time in this country, and I'm using New York as my example because I got my master's here in New York and I took a lot of classes on the formation of a race here in New York. Whiteness was constructed as a sort of social category in opposition to, so you weren't Native American, you weren't African American, you didn't have any black ancestors, you were English, Dutch, or German, basically. And here in New York, there were large populations of Irish, Italian, and Jewish people who were not considered white until the 1950s, right? When the civil rights movement started really picking up steam, people needed to sort of define themselves in opposition to the black population and the African American population, so they were all sort of subsumed into this larger category of whiteness and determined to be white. So we see that Irish people, Italian people, Hungarians, Polish, every single type of nationality or ethnicity sort of gets rolled up into one and everyone is white, right? And that's how whiteness in America operates. Their ethnic identity is less important than the overall identity and identification as white. Blackness does not work the same way, right? For a long time, to white Americans, when they're trying to define us, they would say, we are all black, right? I'm Dominican, my family's from the Dominican Republic. A lot of these people are mixed. Cardi B is Afro-Latina like me, but if you were to ask some random person in Alabama, they would say that we're all black and there's no real difference. But to us, there is a difference. I see things like this that says that Cardi B is not black and how dare she claim blackness. I see things like this, biracial black women does not equal black women representation. I see Tyreek Withers talking about his own identity, saying that he's too white for the black kids and too black for the white kids. So it's clear that something is going on. The one drop rule just doesn't work anymore because people inside of these categories are sort of chafing against them and saying, well, I'm not really this thing. And you see the same sort of thing with Latinidad and Asian identity, where to sort of fight for our own rights, we had to sort of band together as groups and ignore the nationality and ethnicity part of it to sort of just stand in, we are all Latino, we are all Asian, but I'm not going to talk about the Asian community because I don't have a lot of expertise there. But with Latinos, that's hard, right? Because you can have someone like Sofia Vergara or somebody who's from Argentina whose family is Italian or German, or you could have somebody like Zoe Saldana. And to the US Census, they're both Latina, but obviously their experiences living in this country are different. It is also interesting to me because it seems like the idea in Hollywood is that if you are black, you're going to root for everybody black, which is kind of a thing. But then you also, again, keep having these conversations where it's if you only cast mixed people to portray fully monoracially black people, it's going to turn into a whole thing because of colorism and because their experiences are not the same thing as that of a monoracial black woman. Not to bring housewives into it, but you also get conversations like this where the darker skinned women on the cast get bullied, and then if they fight back or when they fight back, they are accused of being bullies because they're darker, and the fan reaction to them is very different, right? So Giselle and Robin here on the bottom are fully black women, right? They have 4 black grandparents, but obviously they have very fair skin and very light eyes. And then Ashley up at the top is biracial. So it again creates this thing of who is making these distinctions and who is making these rules. I grew up here in New York like Cardi B. I grew up in the Bronx like Cardi B. I have friends who are Black American, who are Haitian, who are Jamaican, who are Nigerian. And so when we have these conversations, it's because we grew up with so many different types of people, you have to specify where you're from, right? Our teachers would assume that we're all black, we're all some sort of black or some version of black, but like we understand the designations. And I think that my final point is that inside of our communities, if you are descended from the diaspora, you don't necessarily feel the need to sort of subsume yourself into this larger overall racial category the way that white people do. So somebody like me or Zoe Saldana would identify as Afro-Latino because we have ancestors who are descended from the diaspora, that is, victims of the Atlantic slave trade. If you were to ask me, are you black? I would say I'm Afro-Latino because here in America or New York specifically, when you ask someone, are you black? You have to specify, right? Are you asking like, and I think that's where you get the I know black puppy thing. I'm not going to defend that flavor of Dominican. That was also 15 years ago because we didn't have the language for this. Nobody was Afro-Latino 15 years ago. Like, this is all language that was introduced into the mainstream consciousness by scholars, and we're all starting to slowly use it, but like nobody's using it right. So for a lot of people, if you ask them, are you black? They would be like, no, I'm Dominican, because they think that you're asking them if you're black American. So again, it turns into a conversation. If you ask somebody, are you black? I don't know. Obviously, I will not speak for these women, but like, I don't know what they would answer. Would they say, I'm multiracial? Would they say, I'm biracial? Would they say, my mom is Polish or my mom is Danish or whatever? But if you were to ask a white American, they would say, yeah, you're black. In summation, what I'm trying to say is I think we as a people, people of the diaspora, don't necessarily subsume ourselves into these larger overall racial categories the same way that a lot of other people do, right? Because that means giving up your identity in a way that we very, very strongly resist, right? Like all my friends who are Haitian or Nigerian or Jamaican or Black American very, very strongly hold on to their cultural ties, right? I know people who have been in this country for generations, but they still tell people, yeah, my great grandparents are from the Caribbean, my great grandparents are from Jamaica. They still don't identify as Black American because they do not have the same lived experience as someone who is Black American. This video got very long, but obviously ask me questions. We can talk about this, but don't fight and don't bean soup.